My mom laughed. "You'll never own a home like your sister's." Dad agreed. My sister smirked. "You're just jealous, right?" A week later, I invited her over for tea. The second she walked in, she called Mom, screaming, "You need to get here, now!" The second Bree stepped through my front door, she went white, not pale, white, like something had been switched off behind her eyes. She'd barely made it past the mat when she stopped, one hand flat against the wall, staring down at my hallway floor like it had said something to her. Then she pulled out her phone with a hand that wasn't steady, and she called our mother and she screamed into it, "Mom, you need to get here, now!" I hadn't touched her. I hadn't said a cruel word. All I'd done was let my sister stand in a hallway I built with my own hands, and something about that hallway had cracked her open in a way I hadn't planned for and didn't fully understand yet. She turned away from me, one palm pressed flat to her stomach like she was holding her insides in, and I watched my sister, the golden one, the one my mother bragged about in the church basement, come completely apart over a stretch of drywall and exposed framing. I'm Nora. I'm 34. I build houses for a living, and that's exactly why this story ends the way it does. I'd been the quiet daughter my whole life, the one nobody bothered explaining themselves to, because nobody thought I mattered enough to lie to. A week before Bree showed up shaking in my hallway, my mother had set a soup ladle down on the dinner table like a gavel and told me, flat out, in front of everyone, that I would never own a home like my sister's. My father nodded along, the way he always does when she says something she wants to stay said. Bree just smiled at her plate and asked if I was jealous. I didn't argue. I never do. I just watched, and I filed it away, the way I file every hairline crack I'm not sure about yet. Mark it, watch it, come back. I run a small remodeling outfit, Hall & Co. It's me, two guys I trust, and a truck older than my nephew. I've swung a hammer for 11 years, trained under a framer who'd fail a wall for being off by a 16th of an inch and make you redo it. 3 years ago, I bought a condemned wreck on Maple Street, rotted joists, a sagging roof, a foundation everyone told me to bulldoze, and I rebuilt it myself, stud by stud, permit by permit, inspection by inspection, because I wanted to, not because anyone made me. I live there now, in a house I understand down to the bones. I don't explain myself much. That's the flaw, if you want to name one. I let people fill my silence with whatever story is easiest, and for my family, the easy story was that quiet meant failing. Bree is 3 years older than me, 37 now, and for as long as I can remember, she was the one who made our mother's face light up walking into church. She married Del Vance 6 years ago. Del calls himself a developer. He wears a good watch and talks about opportunities the way other men talk about the weather, and he'd put up a handful of houses on the new side of town before Ridgeview, always finished by the same general contractor, a man named Kip Dolan. I never liked Del, but I kept that to myself because disliking a man for the way he talks isn't a reason, and I try to have reasons. Bree was never cruel to me exactly. She was worse, gentle about it. She'd touch my arm, ask if work was slow, tell me there was no shame in renting, and mean every soft word as a small knife. My mother, meanwhile, had spent 30 years keeping score in a town that pretends not to keep score at all, who got the good pew, whose kids went to college, whose daughter married up. When Bree married Del and the houses started going up, my mother finally had a card worth playing, and she played it everywhere. The church committee, the beauty parlor, the grocery line. So when my mother scrolled through photos of Bree's new house, Ridgeview Court, 2 stories, a stone front, walnut floors she wanted me to appreciate the cost of, and used it as a stick to measure me with, nobody at that table noticed the one thing I noticed. I wasn't looking at the walnut. I was looking at the roofline behind it, and something about the way it sagged, ever so slightly, over a long run, made my stomach drop before my brain caught up to why. 2 days after that dinner, my mother called about the housewarming. The whole family, the neighbors, half the church, and me expected to show up gracious. I surprised us both. "Why doesn't Bree come see my place instead?" I said. "I'll make tea." She's never really looked at what I did on Maple Street. There was a pause on the line, the kind you get when someone can't figure out your angle. "Your place," my mother repeated, like I'd offered to show off a shed. She said yes eventually, because saying no would have made her look ungracious, and appearances are her whole religion. I found out later what she told Bree. Poor Nora wants to show off her fixer-upper. Let her have it. And I let her believe that, because it was easier than explaining what I actually wanted, which was to watch my sister's face the moment she felt honest framing under her own feet. I didn't know yet how much that moment would cost her. I just knew I needed her to feel it before I said a single word. That was the first loop. I told myself I was imagining it, that a contractor's eye finds flaws everywhere, the way a mechanic hears every engine tick. I zoomed into the photo anyway, alone at my kitchen table that night, past the granite and the arch, and into the corners nobody's supposed to look at, which is exactly where a house tells the truth. The flashing over the entry was lapped backward, so water would run behind it instead of over it. At the corner where the front wall met the ground, a hairline crack was already opening in stone, less than a year old. New houses settle. They don't crack there, that fast, that specifically. That corner was carrying the weight of the whole front wall, and it was already complaining. My hands went cold looking at it. I told myself it could still be nothing. Bad angle, bad light, a homeowner's Instagram filter doing something strange to the mortar line. I wanted it to be nothing so badly that I almost believed myself. It wasn't nothing. That was the second loop. The next morning I called a woman named Deb Ferris, who'd been hanging drywall in this county for 30 years and knew every contractor's secrets because crews talk to the drywall team like furniture, like nobody's listening. I asked her, casual, if she'd worked any of my brother-in-law Del's jobs. She went quiet in the specific way that answers a question before the mouth catches up. Did the one before Ridgeview, she finally said. Got stiffed 6 weeks. Kip Dolan, that's his GC, kept saying the draw hadn't come through. Then it came through and I still had to fight for it. She told me the crews were always rushed, that inspections got already done, done before the inspector had shown up that Dell liked bringing his own appraiser. I sat in my truck in her driveway a long time after that call, key in my hand, not turning it, because there's a difference between disliking your brother-in-law and realizing your sister might be standing inside a lie with her name on the mortgage. One of those is family gossip. The other ruins people. The third loop came from a place anyone can access, and almost nobody thinks to look. The county's own online permit records. I typed in the Ridgeview address and told myself I was just satisfying curiosity, the way you tell yourself one more scroll won't hurt. New construction on a loan that size leaves a paper trail, a permit, a sequence of inspections, and something called a draw inspection, where the bank sends someone out to confirm real work has actually been done before releasing the next chunk of money. I read the file twice because I didn't trust myself the first time. The permit was there. The final sign-off was there, dated, stamped, complete. But between the framing inspection and that final sign-off, there should have been a third draw inspection on a house that size. It wasn't there. The record jumped straight from framing to final, skipping the one step where a bank's own person is supposed to walk the structure before the biggest chunk of money goes out the door. My hands were actually shaking by the time I printed it. I told myself banks make clerical errors. I did not believe myself even a little. I tried to fix it quietly first, the way you always try the small fix before you accept you need the big one. I called my father instead of confronting anyone, hoping he'd have some ordinary explanation that would let me put the folder down and go back to being the daughter who didn't cause trouble. He didn't give me one. He gave me something worse. Leave it be, he said, voice flatter and more tired than I'd heard it even during his hospital stay that winter. When I pushed, he told me the truth in pieces, the way men like my father hand out truth reluctantly, like it costs him blood. Back during his heart scare, with the medical bills piling up in envelopes he'd stopped opening, he'd given Dell a chunk of his retirement for the Ridgeview opportunity on a promise it would come back doubled. He said it like a confession. He's family, he said, needing that to be enough of a reason. It wasn't. That was the fourth loop, and it was the one that turned this from suspicion into something with real stakes. Because if I was right, my father's retirement wasn't invested. It was gone, and he already half knew it, and he was choosing not to know the rest because knowing would break something in him he couldn't afford to break. The fifth loop came from an electrician named Tom Ree, a name Deb had passed me. Tom had wired the whole Ridgeview house and never gotten paid right. He didn't want to talk at first. There's shame in getting stiffed, like it's somehow your fault for trusting a signature. But once he understood I wasn't there to make trouble for him, he told me the mechanism, plain. Dell had made him sign a lien waiver, the document that says a contractor has already been paid and gives up the right to place a lien on the property before the money ever came. Bank won't fund if there's open liens, Tom said. So he got us all to sign we'd been paid. Then he didn't pay us. That's not a man who ran short on cash and felt bad about it. That's a man who collected signatures specifically so a bank would release money specifically, timed so no one could stop it. Sloppiness is random. This was aimed. By the time I had all 5 pieces, the roofline, Deb's account, the missing draw inspection, my father's retirement money, Tom's lien waiver, I understood I wasn't looking at a family embarrassment anymore. I was looking at a construction loan fraud with my father's savings and my sister's name both sitting inside it, and I couldn't unknow that. No matter how badly some old, over-responsible part of me wanted to hand the folder to somebody else and let this be somebody else's problem. So I stopped trying to fix it alone. I called an attorney first, Frank Delgado, who'd handled a lien dispute for me 2 years back and didn't flinch at contractors with complicated family situations. I laid it out for him, the missing inspection, the flagged appraiser, the lien waivers signed for money that never moved. He didn't get emotional about it. He got precise, which is what I needed. You have standing to file a complaint, he told me. You're not accusing anyone in that filing. You're reporting a documented discrepancy and letting the county do its job. That protects you. He walked me through exactly what to keep and how to organize it. Dated printouts, the appraiser's name cross-referenced against a public county notice, Tom's account written and dated in his own words, Deb's account the same. Build it like it's going to court, Frank said, even if it never does. That's the only way it holds up when people start yelling. Frank had me label everything before I ever handed it to a stranger. Exhibit A, the permit history. Exhibit B, the appraiser's flag notice. Exhibit C, Tom's signed statement. Exhibit D, Deb's. Dates on everything, he said. Chain of custody isn't just a courtroom phrase. It's what keeps this from becoming your word against your mother's. I sat at my kitchen table 2 nights running, printing, dating, initialing, until the manila folder felt less like gossip and more like a case file, which is exactly what Frank wanted it to feel like. So I did. I filed a formal complaint with the county, not a whisper campaign, an actual document, a citizen reporting a possible permit violation, which any of us can do. It landed on the desk of a building inspector named Marisol Reyes, 14 years in county code enforcement, the kind of inspector who doesn't care whose Sunday she ruins with a violation notice. I'd crossed paths with her professionally over the years, always on the right side of a code question. She didn't take my side when I handed her the folder. She went still and clinical instead, which told me more than sympathy would have. If the third inspection wasn't done and the house was signed off as final, she said, that's the county's problem now, not just yours. She told me she'd need to pull the bank's internal draw records and do a preliminary site visit before any full reinspection could be scheduled. Standard chain of custody for a permit complaint, she called it. Everything documented, everything dated, nothing that could be waved away later as hearsay. Then she told me something that changed the shape of everything. Ridgeview wasn't the only house tied to that flagged appraiser. The county had already opened a quiet review of a batch of permits on the new side of town, and Dell's projects were sitting inside that stack. My complaint hadn't started a fire from nothing. It had pushed one address addressed to the top of a file that was already smoldering. The bank got pulled in fast after that. A fraud investigator named Denise Okafor, out of the lender's internal risk division, called me 2 days later. She'd been assigned once the county's inquiry crossed her desk, and she wanted to confirm what I'd found against the bank's own draw file. "We show the same gap you do," she said, careful, professional, giving away nothing more than the fact pattern required. "No third-party verification prior to the final draw release. That's a problem on our end, too." She didn't say the word fraud out loud. She didn't have to. Once a bank starts pulling its own file and using words like discrepancy and internal review, the district attorney is rarely far behind, and we both knew it. Denise asked me to send copies of everything Frank had labeled, and she asked one more question before she hung up: how long I'd had the folder together, and whether anyone at the family had seen it yet. "Keep it that way a little longer if you can," she said. "The fewer people who know what's coming, the cleaner this stays." I didn't tell her I already knew exactly which room I planned to walk it into. Even the county recorder's office ended up in it, in its own small way. A clerk named Priya Anand pulled the certified copy of the final sign-off for me, the one with the county seal raised right into the paper, because Frank said a plain printout could be waved off as a formatting glitch, but a certified copy couldn't be argued with in front of a crowd. "People believe paper with a seal on it," he told me. "They don't believe folders." He wasn't wrong. I had 3 names now with real weight behind them: an attorney, a county inspector, a bank investigator, and a folder that could survive being read by strangers. What I didn't have was time. Marisol's earliest availability for that preliminary site visit was Saturday, midday. The exact day, the exact hours, my mother had chosen for Bree and Dell's housewarming. I didn't arrange that. I just didn't get in its way. The days before Saturday felt like standing under a header that was already sagging, waiting to see which board would go first. Bree texted me twice. The first at midnight just said, "Why are you doing this?" No question mark. Like she already knew the answer and hated it. The second came 2 days later, longer, and it was the most honest thing my sister had said to me in years. She said she'd noticed things for a year and told herself she was imagining them, a door that never quite closed right, a cracked L handled a little too fast, contractors who came to the house angry and left quiet. She said she'd asked Dell once, straight out, if everything about the loan was okay, and he'd smiled and told her not to worry her pretty head, and she'd let herself be told. "I have 2 kids," she wrote. "This is our whole life. If it comes apart, we have nothing." I felt something for her in that message I hadn't expected to feel. Not triumph, just tired sorrow, for a woman who'd traded her own eyes for her own house and was only now starting to want them back. My mother, meanwhile, was doing my work for me without knowing it. Word had gotten around town that there was tension between the sisters, and my mother cannot stand a story she doesn't control. So she went on offense, called relatives, called church friends, told a version where I was the jealous, unmarried younger sister trying to ruin her sister's big moment out of spite. Then, to kill the rumor for good, she made the housewarming bigger. More chairs, more neighbors, a packed room so that when I showed up looking bitter, the whole town could see Bree's success surrounding her and put the gossip to rest. She was building an audience to shame me with. She had no idea she was building witnesses. My father drove out to Maple Street alone the night before. No call first, just his old sedan in my driveway, and his hat in his hands on my porch like a man arriving at a funeral. We sat at my table a foot from the yellow folder, and he didn't ask what was in it, because I think by then he already knew. "I knew something was wrong with that house," he finally said, turning his coffee cup in slow circles. The way Dell talked, too smooth. I told myself I was being an old fool. His eyes went wet and he didn't wipe them. "I gave him the money anyway, because your mother wanted it to be true so bad, and because I was scared, and it was easier to be a fool than to be broke." It wasn't an apology, not really. Not for 30 years of nodding along while my mother measured me and found me short. But for my father, that was as close to one as he had. "You'll never own a home like your sister's," he said quietly, repeating her words back into my kitchen like he was hearing them for the first time. Then he shook his head. "Thank God," he said, and finished his coffee and drove home in the dark. I barely slept the Thursday and Friday before. I kept running the math in my head like a load calculation I couldn't make balance. 24 hours, then 12, then 6, and no version of the plan let me warn Bree without warning Dell, and no version let me warn my father without him trying to talk me out of it, to save what was left of his money and his pride in the same breath. My hands weren't steady when I made coffee Friday morning. I burned it and made it again. I kept the folder on my kitchen table where I could see it, the way you keep an eye on a beam you're not sure will hold, and every time I walked past it, my stomach dropped the same half-inch it had the first night I zoomed into that photo of the roofline. Saturday came clear and cool. I didn't dress up. Clean jeans, a good flannel, boots wiped down. I wanted to walk in looking exactly like what I am, because what I am was the whole point. Around 10, Marisol texted that she'd be at Ridgeview by noon to pull records and inspect, right in the thick of the party. I texted back one word, "Thanks." Then I picked up the folder the way you carry something you've already decided about, and I drove over. Ridgeview Court looked like a magazine spread, which is the whole trick of a house like that. Cars lining both curbs, balloons on the mailbox, the big front windows packed with relatives and neighbors, and half our church, my mother glowing in her good dress at the center of a room she'd built to bury me in. I walked past that hairline crack on the corner, longer now than in the photo, and nobody else so much as glanced at it. The famous walnut floors gave just slightly under the weight of the crowd. That faint bounce that told me everything about the joists underneath. Bree saw me first, saw the folder under my arm, and every drop of color left her face again, just like it had in my hallway. She crossed the room fast and got close, whispering so no one else could hear. "Please," she said, "you're You're just jealous, right? Tell me you're just jealous. Her voice cracked on the exact words she'd used to cut me at that dinner table, except now she wasn't accusing me with them. She was begging me to make them true because if I was just jealous, her house was fine, her life was fine, and none of what she already suspected was real. I didn't answer her. I put a hand on her arm, gentle, the way she used to touch mine right before she slipped a soft-voiced knife between my ribs, and I walked past her into the middle of the room. Dell was holding court by the granite island, telling some man about his vision for the next development, the watch on his wrist catching the light every time he gestured. I waited for a break in his sentence, and the room quieted the way rooms do when they sense something coming. When he finally clocked me, I asked him one question, soft enough that people had to lean in to hear it. Dell, where's the third draw inspection on this house? His grin didn't move, but his hand did, tightening on his glass. I'm sorry, what? A little laugh for the crowd. I didn't laugh with him. The third draw inspection, I said again, same soft voice. The bank's supposed to confirm the framing before releasing the big draw. The county has no record it was ever done. Makes me wonder what the bank was shown instead. I set the folder on the granite next to the cheese board and opened it. I didn't make a speech. I laid the pages out one at a time, like a hand of cards. The permit history with the county seal on it, the gap where the third inspection should have been, the flagged appraiser's name beside the public notice that had named him a year earlier, Tom Ree's account, and the lien waiver he'd signed for money that never came. Someone's neighbor put on reading glasses. My mother pushed to the front and snatched the top page, and I watched her hand start to shake because she can spin a rumor in a church basement, but she cannot argue with a county seal in front of the whole congregation. You told me, I said, quiet enough that only the people who mattered heard it, that I'd never own a home like my sister's. I let it sit there on the stone. You were right. That's when the knock came. Not loud, firm, the kind that doesn't wait long for an answer. Marisol Reyes stepped into the front hall in her county jacket, clipboard in hand, right into the center of the crowd my mother had spent a week assembling. I'm looking for the owner, she said. County received a complaint regarding a permit discrepancy at this property. I'll need to see the draw inspection records and walk the structure. Dell started talking fast, all the smooth gone out of his voice, saying there'd been a mistake, saying he had paperwork somewhere. Marisol didn't argue with him. She filled out a form and taped a printed notice to the frame of that beautiful arch doorway. Notice of violation. Records required. Structure subject to full reinspection. Subject to being declared unsafe pending review. Bree made a sound I'll never forget. She turned on Dell in front of her mother, her neighbors, her church. You did this, she said. You did this to us. The room came apart in the same second, the way a bad structure fails. All at once, not slowly. My mother rounded on me, her committee voice gone, replaced by something loud and ugly. How dare you humiliate your own sister in her own home? Dell talked over her, blaming the appraiser, the bank, Tom Ree, anyone whose name was on a page in my folder. Somebody near the door already had their phone out, recording without even trying to hide it anymore. A church deacon I'd known since I was 6 stood frozen by the cheese board with a plate of crackers still balanced in one hand, staring at the violation notice like it might rearrange itself into something less permanent. My aunt, the one who'd first come to me quiet and embarrassed about a strange statement, pressed a hand over her mouth and didn't take it away. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I stood there calm next to the open folder and let them be as loud as they needed to be, because I learned a long time ago on job sites. When a structure fails, you don't yell at it. You step back and let it show everyone exactly what it was made of. When my mother finally ran out of breath, I picked my pages up off the granite, squared them, and slid them back into the folder, slow, so everyone could watch me be gentle with the truth. I built my house with my own 2 hands, I said, to the whole room now, in my ordinary voice. Every joist, every wire, every permit. It's small, it's honest, and it will still be standing long after this one's been opened up and made to answer for how it was built. I looked at Bree, no triumph in it, just tired. I never wanted a home like yours. I wanted a home that was true. There's a difference. I hope you find it. I tucked the folder under my arm and walked out across those famous walnut floors, feeling them give under my boots one last time, past Marisol's violation notice on the beautiful arched door and out into the clean, cool air. Behind me, the house my mother had spent 30 years turning into a scoreboard was full of shouting. By the following week, the county's full reinspection confirmed everything the paper trail had promised. Undersized headers, a footing poured shallow, work signed off that had never truly been finished. Marisol's report went into the same file Denise had already flagged at the bank, and the bank's own fraud division grew a second name attached to that appraiser, then a third, from 2 other addresses on the new side of town. Dell was dealing with lawyers now instead of a good watch, and the smooth didn't work on any of them. Frank told me the DA's office had requested the full exhibit set, my folder, relabeled with a case number instead of a letter, which was the strangest feeling of my life, watching something I'd built at my own kitchen table turn into evidence with an official stamp on it. My mother hasn't said "my daughter's house on Ridgeview" in the church basement since. She doesn't say much of anything there anymore. She told me once, with a ladle in her hand, that I'd never own a home like my sister's. She was right. It turned out to be the kindest thing she ever said to me, and the last thing she said before the county came knocking on a door she'd propped wide open herself. I still live on Maple Street, in the house I understand down to the studs, and I've noticed something I didn't expect. The quiet doesn't feel like losing anymore. It feels like the one thing in that family nobody could fake me out of.